Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Jeff Mendelson, and this is the One Big Tip podcast. And today, I am really pleased to have with me on the line Dan Englander. Dan is the CEO and founder of Schema, a fractional new business team where he helps marketing agencies attract clients, keep their pipelines full, and grow. He's also the host of the Digital Agency Growth podcast and the author of Mastering Account Management and the B2B Sales Print. In this episode of the One Big Tip podcast, Dan is telling our listeners how distinct and creative campaigns can lead to valuable relationships and sales. So, Dan, I'm so happy that you're able to join me today. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So this is going to be a lot of fun. We were joking a little bit, in the pre-call. I caught some interesting things about your prior careers on LinkedIn. Can you give us a little bit of a background of who you are and why you are amazing?
Oh, thank you. So again, Dan Englander, CEO and founder of a company called Schema. My background originally is in the agency space, basically moved to New York out of college around 2010, worked a couple internships and then found myself as kind of an accounts grunt pitching things to random brands back when you could just say we do social media and we're really cool and hip, and then brands would give you millions of dollars. From there, fell into kind of a split sales client service role at a boutique creative house. And finally took ownership over being in sales while managing clients and selling animated video to big companies and agencies and help them grow to seven figures. And then 2014, a little bird named Tim Ferriss started chirping into my ear, read the 4 Hour Work Week, quit the job, traveled Asia, published self-published some business books and started Sales Schema. And then eventually, before long, we kind of morphed into what we are now, which is a fractional new business team. And we're going out to the market to help our clients get meetings. And we've learned a lot over the years and changed kind of how we do things. But ultimately, what we're focused on is helping our clients keep the pipeline full in the context of selling to busy and skeptical decision makers, often for marketing services.
So that's a really big mandate. What you described there, right? You have these, basically you're helping sales organizations do more sales, right? Actually put more, put more leads into their pipeline. What makes your team or your approach unique to the exclusion of all these other professionals who have already worked in this space and maybe think they know everything there is to know about it? Like, what makes you guys so unique in this space?
Yeah. So to answer that question, I think what most people are doing is kind of a version of the same thing, which is cold outreach, right? Making a list. Okay, we want to go after these companies, and proceeding to put them through some sort of funnel that might involve multiple channels like email, LinkedIn, phone, direct mail, etc. And I'm not saying that never works, but I think that what's happened is for most offerings and especially digital services and agency services and the like, the level of the market skepticism is higher, and the things that used to work, 1 or 5 years ago, stop working as well because people generally understand the value proposition of an agency. And even if you start an agency in a new niche like influencer marketing or whatever, that becomes trodden and old very, very quickly. So, the way that you communicate in a skeptical market is different than the way that you communicate in a new market, i.e. if you're selling, I don't know, crypto or Web3, you could probably just say we do cool stuff with crypto and Web3 and manage to get meetings and that kind of thing because it's new. So to answer your question, the way that we started thinking about de-risking conversations, which is all we're all trying to do. You're not trying to close anybody from outreach. When you're trying to get the meeting, you're just trying to de-risk a conversation, is through relationships, right? Through the mutual orbits that our clients have, right? And basically Venn diagramming the people that are already likely to talk to our clients with the people they ultimately want to sell to and focusing on that group. So that's what makes us different, is our ability to find those people in the data and then write copy that's actually going to convince them to have a conversation based on business and or personal commonalities and relationships. That makes sense. So tactically, I could go a lot further, but that's kind of from a high level what it looks like.
What's interesting about what you bring up is how the market how the mediums of how we communicate have been changing over the past couple of years. And it seems now that there are some real tectonic shifts in what's allowed, what's not allowed, what you can, where you can advertise, where you can't advertise. Can you talk a little bit about what are the changes that you've seen relatively recently, like within the past 2 years, and how that has affected the marketing that you do and to generate those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is just the level of information and understanding about any given offering, right? So I think that we've heard a lot about this concept that, if you're a busy decision maker, you will have consumed dozens of articles and case studies before you even pick up the phone and talk to a salesperson. But I think what's neglected is the fact that those people don't enjoy that process, and the fact that that process isn't easy, right? So I think that that's the one thing, is just like the complete, competition for attention and information I'm not, observing anything new, but I think that that's increased by orders of magnitude, especially after COVID and the whole world's going digital. So I think that's one of the bigger things. I think the other thing is that in the context of our little domain of outreach, right, doing outbound to get meetings and calls and that kind of thing, you have to be sending. It's a lot more like SEO. It's becoming, I think, a mature market. And if you're familiar with SEO, there probably was a time in the early mid 2000s where people could like hack it and create and use little tactics and keyword stuffing or whatever to rank a page. And now there's exceptions, but by and large, if you're putting out content that people want to see, and you check the boxes and stuff, you're going to rank. And that's the main approach. There's less of a hack. There's less of like this thing going on. And I think outbound and conducting outreach, whether it's on LinkedIn or email or phone, is becoming more like that. You have to send people outreach that they are not mad at, even if they don't want to necessarily talk to you right now. So those are a couple things that come to mind.
What is really interesting about this conversation is that you start out with one simple action, right? Whether you're going to make a cold call, whether you're going to send a cold email, whether you're going to put, an ad up in front of somebody based on some kind of targeting. But in order to do that at scale, right, and especially building relationships, doing that at scale, that I think is a completely different and unique skill set, that you need to think about. Let's talk about your one big tip on how to create relationships at scale, but also, make them distinct and make sure that you're talking to the right audience, no matter how targeted, and niche that audience is. How does that look in your world when you are talking to a customer like that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think the main big tip, and there's different ways to put this out there, but kind of thinking about it more as we talk live, I think it's do outreach or do sales in a way where you already have an edge, is what I'm trying to say. Like, contact the sort of prospects that are already likely to talk to you based on a business or personal commonality. So for example, what we tend to see a lot of the time is that people, that are selling agency services, that they've been around the block for a while, or whatever they're selling, it doesn't matter if it's what it is really. They already have a pretty big network. They are going to trade shows maybe, or they have a podcast like what we're doing right now, or they are doing a lot of business in their own backyard, or whatever, or they're in a trade association, they're in a networking group, and then they sort of like forget about all of that, and then they go off and they build lists and they say, I got this really cool tactic that I heard about on a show or read in a book, and I'm going to put people through it and say about how awesome we are, and go from there. So I think a better way to do that, I might have lost your question, is to basically, start with the people that are already likely to speak to you, cross-reference with the people that you can do business with. And I think that tends to be a lot more effective.
So what we're talking about here is identifying your target market. That's marketing 101, right? You need to identify who it is that you're going to talk to and make sure that you're speaking their language, you are touching their pain points, and you're actually offering a solution, that they can latch onto and ultimately purchase. But when you're creating that, and you want to make sure that you're touching the various subgroups within that, right? So say for example, you're selling coffee, right? Some people like just want the decaf. Some people want the extra hard stuff. Others want the ones for Nespresso capsules, things like that. You really do need to be creative, that you are not only creative enough to speak that language to each specific subgroup, but also the tools that you're using to be as agile enough in order to help you segment that, in order to create those unique and distinct conversations.
Yeah.
In order to make that happen.
Yeah. So I would just kind of like respectfully push back a little bit in that I think that in the context of B2B and significant deal sizes, significant, can vary depending on your world. All those things, the differentiation, the finding, those various other checkpoints are less important at the beginning than simply de-risking the conversation. The question is, how do you de-risk that conversation with that prospect that you want to reach? And our whole thing is like, the way to short circuit that is to go in with where you already have a certain measure of trust, be it from a relationship or a commonality. So, for example, I'll give a little, this might be useful to kind of like, help people wrap their heads around this. We have a client, they're an agency, they're based in Chicago. They do big branding work, media, they're probably 6-figure average deal size. They're selling into hard to reach verticals, healthcare, universities, others like that. And we knew, we're like, if we just do what everyone else is doing and throw a bunch of case studies at some CMOs, they're not gonna speak to our clients. So what we did is we said, we're gonna say, okay, we're gonna identify the companies you want to do business with. You're gonna export your list of contacts, whether it's from email or LinkedIn or whatever. You let us know everybody you'd feel comfortable asking for an intro from. We're then gonna basically contact the end prospect and say, hey, we know this person. I saw we have a couple contacts in common. By the way, we're doing this thing. Would you be open to a conversation? And from that, we were getting probably a dozen or so meetings a week from that. And in big companies, people don't typically take that meeting. So that's kind of how we think about it. Is Jeff, I think you're right. All those things are really important. But I think in a B2B context, or whenever you're in a situation where a conversation has to happen, that's the first barrier. That's like the first boss. And then positioning and all these important things come a little bit later. So I don't know. I might have lost your question, but let me know if that's on.
No, that
track.
that really hits it. I guess what I'm trying to get at here is I want to understand what makes a campaign distinct and creative, right? Because that was something that that we had discussed beforehand. And when you're queuing up these meetings and you're analyzing what works for these specific clients, like what kind of parameters is your team looking for in order to make them like really distinct, so you're not just selling to healthcare client number 1, which is the same as healthcare client number 2, 3, 4, 5? Like how do you differentiate that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And there obviously isn't a one size fits all for what makes a campaign distinct or creative. But I think the effect of it, the outcome you're going for, is that pretty much everybody that gets that message has to think that it was just for them. If they think that they're on a list or something like that, it usually doesn't work, right? And also it has to de-risk the conversation enough. So those two things combined, there's not one way to do that, but I think the way in which people tend to go wrong with making a campaign distinct or creative is they get a little too self-obsessed. It becomes a little bit too much about them, and they talk about why their organization is so great before people have given enough attention to care about it, right? So oftentimes for us, it's less about the channel and it's less about multiple touch points or sending people visuals or whatever like that. And it's more about the strength of the connection and the commonality. And oftentimes that's like, we're really going for the one touch point to do most of the heavy lifting, right? So for example, if you're doing this yourself, even if you never hire a company like ours, this often looks like front loading the work a lot more. So you're spending a lot more time on identifying the prospects that have that commonality and then writing a really good first letter. And there's honestly something like very old school about that, right? Like writing somebody like an actual letter, not physical, but like the vibe of it is very much like first touch point centric, if that makes sense, to de-risk that conversation. So a lot of the times, like the distinctiveness and the creativity of this is sending people a message that looks and feels different than everything else in their inbox, right? And there's obviously not one way to do that. We've seen long messages, short messages, whatever, but that's kind of how we're thinking about it.
You know what's interesting? I'm thinking about a talk that I saw Dan Kennedy give a couple months ago at the Funnel Hacking Live conference, where he's been doing this for a good long time, and he was doing it back in the days where it didn't cost half a cent to send an email to any particular prospect. Like you had to put a real physical
Yeah.
stamp on a real physical letter in order to send it out. And now we're blessed with so many of these tools that allow us to create these conversations with so much more frequency. But what happens is that now the competition has gone way up, right? Because not only are you sending this out, but everyone else is sending out the same thing. So it's real important that you have that you have that message that does pierce through and doesn't feel like you're sending out a group blast, but that I'm dealing specifically with you, and this is the one who I'm talking to. And
Correct.
that in and of itself, in the copywriting world, is literally an art. It's something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something everyone should master, as part of their skill set.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that a lot of the times, this is kind of getting to a different topic because I might be jumping around a little bit, but I think people are expecting too much of their salespeople to be able to master that, right? You might have somebody that's really good on the phone and really good presenting, but you're also asking them to be like a Dan Kennedy level copywriter and manage the systems to get the scale out of it, which is something else we can talk about. So it's like that usually means division of duties. And even if you're a solopreneur or you have a very small team, you've got to think of yourself as wearing different hats in order to actually make it work, right? Make the machine function, basically. Yeah.
I love it. I love that explanation. Thank you so much for sharing. Dan, can you please let everyone know how they can find you and your company, and how they can reach out to you directly if they want to learn more?
Yeah, thanks so much. So we have a on-demand live training, which is a video. It's a fancy way of saying it's a video that you can pause and stuff, which is saleschema.com/relationships, plural. And I'm always happy to nerd out. I'm a big email person. So Dan@saleschema.com. And hopefully I can help.
Amazing stuff. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. It's been a very, very interesting conversation. And, like you, I love nerding out on this stuff. Thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. It was a lot of fun.